John Archibald is a father and husband struggling to maintain his family financially. With his wife's car repossessed, and him falling behind with his rent, he searches for a second job.
Rent, either a car or a house, so I thought.
You thought.
His 9-year-old son Mike loves baseball and bodybuilding and wants to be a bodybuilder when he grows up, and he has his parents' support. As John and his wife took Mike to school, John said goodbye. Mike reminded him that he hates goodbyes.
Bye, Mike.
Not goodbye. I hate goodbye.
It is, see you later, not goodbye. Later that day they watch Mike at a mini-league baseball game, where tragedy strikes. Mike collapsed as he was running. They rushed to his aid, screaming his name as they approached, but Mike did not respond. John rushed him to the hospital. As the doctors tried to work out the cause of his collapse, they removed John and his wife from the room because they were hindering the doctors. John was asked to provide his medical card so they could register him and look after his son, which he did. Minutes later they were called to a room where they met the hospital director and Dr. Turner, a cardiologist. John wanted to know how his boy was doing. They told them to sit down. They were informed that their son's heart is 3 times the size of an average child and he will need a heart transplant, or he will die. Mike's mother could not understand, as she was just with him, and he seemed fine. Dr. Turner explained that at this point, he seemed fine. But it is going to get worse. He will sleep more and one day he will fall asleep, and he will not wake up. The hospital director told them to face the fact that their son may not live much longer. John asks if he does not have the surgery, how long will he live? Dr. Turner said it could be months, days, or weeks, no one knows. As they sobbed and comforted each other, John asked Dr. Turner if it were his son, what he would do. He replied that he would do the transplant. John says, okay, we will do the transplant. This is when they found out that his insurance might not cover the procedure. The hospital director told him they must treat this as a cash account, and the hospital has strict policies when dealing with cash accounts. The procedure will cost about $250,000 and he needs to pay 30%, which is $75,000, before they put his son's name on the donors list. John visits his employer to find out why his policy does not cover his son's procedure. He found out that the company has downgraded the policy to save money without his knowledge. Based on the hours he worked, the HMO will only cover $20,000. His employer told him that he can file an appeal, which will take about 7 days. He tries tirelessly, making phone calls and visits to various places, seeking help, but everywhere turned him down. John grows increasingly frustrated as his son's life hangs in the balance. To apply more stress, the hospital rang to tell him his bill is now over $30,000 and his health insurance does not cover that. John sells all his furniture and his car to raise money, but it is only a small fraction of what he requires. He is running out of options. He visits a news reporter and asks him for help, then his wife calls to tell him that they were releasing Mike the next day. He could not believe it because he paid what money he had the day before. His wife told him that he needed to do something, because he always said he was doing something, but it is never enough. John visited the hospital and saw Dr. Turner and asked if he heard they were going to send Mike home. Dr. Turner told him that he is just a doctor. He does not make the decision, the board does. He asked him to make a recommendation to keep Mike at the hospital. He said he makes recommendations all the time, but he still does not make the final decisions on who is discharged from who is not. John told him that he was looking at the hospital brochure and realized that the hospital does over 300 heart surgeries per year. That is over 75 million. But the hospital cannot do one in good faith to save his son's life. Dr. Turner told him they already waived some fees. John told him that he already paid $22,000 and swore on his life that if they help his son, he will pay the rest. He does not know how he is going to do it, but he gives his word that he will pay them back. Dr. Turner refused to help. John pulled a gun and told him he was not asking him anymore. He will give his son a new heart. He moved to another room with others, locked the door with chains, and held them hostage. An ambulance arrives with a gunshot wounded patient. John lets him in and demands Dr. Turner to help him. He was reluctant but operated on the man, saving his life. The street is now full of police officers. The officer in charge is Lieutenant Frank Grimes. He was briefed that the hostage taker is in for the long haul, and has locked down the ER and barricaded himself in. Frank grabbed a security radio and tried to establish some communication with John. He radioed in and asked to speak to the man in charge. Frank asked who he was speaking to. He told him John Q. Frank asked what he wanted. He told them to get Rebecca Payne and tell her to get his son's name on the donors list. Elsewhere in the hospital, Mike is getting cared for by a doctor. He asks his mom for his dad, wondering why he was not there. The chief of police then turned up and told Frank to end this quickly and quietly. Meanwhile, John tries to work out how his son's heart problem did not get picked up on the medical screening he does every year. A young doctor explained that Mike has an HMO and HMO pays their doctor not to test. That is the way they keep their costs down. At the end of the year, the HMO sends the doctor a big check. John radios Frank to check on progress. if his son's name is already gone on the list. Meanwhile, they saw John on camera, sitting down with the hostages. Rebecca Payne arrives and identifies John. John tells them they have until 5:15 p.m. to get his son's name on the list or something bad is going to happen to somebody. One hostage tried to overthrow John but failed. Some hostages were released. They make several comments that John Q is a good man as they rush them outside. Rebecca and the police officers agree to tell John that his son is on the list, thinking that he will not know any different. Rebecca said it's a fact, people die every day, and his son is not the only one that is sick. Inside, the hostages ask John why he is doing what he is doing, and ask him how it makes him better than anyone else because he is threatening to take innocent lives to save his son. So how different is he from any normal murderer, and what his next move is? John told them he hadn't got any more moves. He is waiting on an act of God. Somewhere in another state a car accident happens with a female overtaking a truck. She was killed. Frank and Rebecca visit John's wife who was with their son. They inform her that John is holding hostages to get a heart for their son. Rebecca told her they had decided to put Mike's name on the recipients list and the hospital will pay for everything. Reporters interviewed John's friend, who gave him full support. He told them that all of this would have been avoided. But John was backed into a corner because not everybody walks around with $250,000 in their pockets each day. The police chief sent a sniper in through the vent to try and take John out. Frank disagrees with the idea but was overruled. John's wife informs him of the news that Mike's name is on the list. Meanwhile, a media team manages to hack into the system and gets John's video online. They notice that he was on TV as he spoke to his son on the phone. The sniper had a clear shot. He fires, hitting John in the shoulder. They thought that John was down, but he gets up and pulls him out of the roof. The crowd grows in support of John. John radios and asks to speak to Frank Grimes. He asked why they want to kill him, and that Frank broke the promise. Frank told him there are only two ways out: jail or dead, and no one cares but him. John requested that they bring his son down to him and in turns he will release the sniper. Once he receives his son, then he will give himself up and it will be all over. He told them he will not bury his son will bury him. They brought Mike to him. John released the sniper as promised. But John had a cunning plan. He knew that if he had his son in the room with Dr. Turner that could operate on him, he stood a better chance. John now demands of Dr. Turner to fix his son. He plans to give his heart to his son. Dr. Turner told him that will not work because the procedure is way more complicated, and he's advised against the procedure. He said he will take his own life because someone must die for his son to live. They told him it is crazy. They cannot just remove his heart into Mike's body because he needs to match with the donor, and matching with donor and recipient is extremely complicated, and there are several critical tests that have to be taken to cross-match for blood type, chest cavity, measurements. Both blood tissues must be completely compatible. John said he knows all about compatibility and he knows they matched, and they already know that Mike's heart is 3 times the size it should be, so it will fit. Dr. Turner declines. John asks if when he is lying on the ground dead, if he will not do the operation then, and if he is willing to let 2 people die instead of 1, because of a technicality. Some hostages support John, thinking it is brave. Others think he is crazy. Killing himself will not solve a thing. They told him to accept it that Mike is going to die. He refused to do so, rejecting that idea. He will never accept that he's going to die. He pleaded with Turner to step outside the rules for a minute. He knows what he is asking is completely unethical. Dr. Turner decides to do it. John said he will do anything to keep his son alive. If somebody must die for him to live, it has got to be him because he is his father.
I'm his father, it's me.
As they prepare for surgery, the woman from the accident arrived at the hospital. As they checked her organs, they realized that it was a match for Mike. John has some final touching words with Mike, telling him that he must make sure he listens to his mother and how much he loves him. And when he says he is going to do something, he must do it. After his conversation with Mike, the doctor saw a fax that came in with a message informing them they have found a positive match for Mike. The doctor races through the corridor to get there in time to inform them, so John does not take his life. John makes final preparations to take his own life. The hostages realized that John was putting a bullet in the magazine. Everyone was astonished. They could not believe that the gun that John used to hold them hostage was empty all along. John told them he only had 1 bullet for himself. The doctor arrived to inform Rebecca Payne of the match. John puts the gun to his head and squeezes the trigger. The safety was on. His wife gets on the radio to tell him that they have a match, but John turns the radio off. His wife races to the door, screaming John from behind the glass, trying everything to save her husband. The Heart arrive, and Dr. Turner and his team carry out a successful operation. John awaits his fate with the law. He is seen as a hero by his supporters. I hope you enjoyed this recap from the movie John Q 2002. Please subscribe for more content. Give us a like by ring the bell, it really helps the channel out. Thanks.